Hello friends. You remember how last week we were doing a little bit of rolling out with the balls? So we're going to continue, and today's going to be another little section of that. These are simply 2 tennis balls, right? And I have them wrapped up. You could use a sock. I just happen to have a little satchel from a piece of art or whatever. And so I'm putting them in there. That said, we may take them out at some point in time, but let's start with them in the bag, right? And then we're going to put them on the ground, and we're going to end up laying down on them with them closer to our neck. Now, you may or may not want a block, depending on your neck, where your curvature is in the neck, all of that stuff. It just depends on that. So I'm going to take my glasses off just so I'm not dealing with those when I'm doing any of this. I'm going to lay down, and again, I'm going to have my balls where I can grab them, as well as that block. And I'm going to try to bring those right underneath where my occiput is, where my skull and my neck connect, right? So, by the way, if it feels like it's too much pressure, you could put a blanket under or over the blocks, the balls, so that you don't have quite as much pressure. If you feel like there's not enough pressure, right, you could always come up onto that block. For me, that you can look at my neck is just jammed forward, right? So I personally don't care for the block, but I know some people do. And I'm just going to pause, and there's not a lot for me to do at this point in time except for try to relax as much as I can. And if it's still too much pressure, even with a blanket under or over it, you could go to a wall and do this work against a wall, which takes the weight out of it. So basically, I'm in constructive rest pose, or I'm putting myself into it now anyway, I wasn't. And I'm just allowing myself to soften down into the balls, right? Now, they might move a little bit on you, but one way you can add a little bit of movement that might feel okay, if it's not too much pressure, don't do it if it is to just really simply, like we often rock our head from right to left. And I'm not even going into the full motion. I could go deeper and have more movement to the right and the left, but I don't need more, right? Otherwise it feels like it's too much in my body. I'm just pointing these things out, right? I just have a really gentle rock. And you know, those balls are starting to move down a little bit away from that area, but for me that's okay because that's the next spot we're going to go to. So move that down a little bit and see if you can't catch. Again, if you've got a really high arch in your neck, I have no curvature. You could always put, you know, a short book or something with a harder surface that brings you up just a little bit. And after you've laid on it for a little bit, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and let the head just really gently rock from right to left. And you might find when you're not on your occiput, maybe that motion gets smaller, maybe it gets bigger. And I'm going to encourage you not to look at me and try to gauge what you should be doing by what I'm doing. I mean, you can do it for demonstration. Oh, she's on that part of her neck. But then ultimately, play with it, right? Make it your own. Find out what feels really good in your body. If it's okay, move it down. So now we're more about the C7, which is the bottom of the neck, right, where the neck and the next part of the spine connect. I'm right above the shoulders, I could say. And again, I'm just going to soften down into them. I can put a surface underneath to make it a little further up or a little harder. I can put a blanket over it to make it softer, blanket under it. And for this one, you might move the head from right to left. We start to lose a little bit of the ability to move through the musculature from the movement of the head. So you might also find that if you interlace behind your head and lift your body up just a touch, I still have the part of my body on the balls, and I actually let my upper body slide a little bit. I could say the right elbow slides up to the back of the mat, and then the left one does, right? Again, you can play with it, what brings you into that spot. So now from that spot, you might move it down just a little bit so that it's just a little bit more in line with your tops of your shoulders. And then we're going to try to roll a little bit with the ball. So I like to bring my hands under and lift my head a little bit and let my head lay back in my hands so my neck is soft. And then I'm going to lift my hips a little bit, pushing into my feet. And I'm just going to see if I can't roll my body a little forward and back. And I mean, some people do full rolls. If I'm against a wall, I can do bigger ones. But when I'm bearing my full weight down into the balls, like it doesn't work really well. And I feel like I struggle a lot. And it feels like a lot of pressure in certain areas of my body, etc. So I don't really roll out very much. I roll out a couple of vertebrae at a time. But whatever works for you, right? And hit different parts of my spine differently. So I'm going to go ahead and now move down just a little bit with the balls. I can either move my body or I can reach down at some point. I can't reach them anymore, right? And I might just pause for a moment and soften down into them. I think that's a huge part of it, letting the nervous system get used to it and soften and let go of protection. Again, I can bring my hands behind. I can do that elbow slide back business, and I might get some stuff out of that. I could let my body move a little bit from right to left at this point in time, right? So again, just kind of play with this part of your body. And I'm about midway between my scapula, about middle scapula or so. I might lift my hips and start to roll, and now I have a little more freedom to roll a little longer than I do up by my neck in my body. But again, I'm only probably doing about 3, maybe 4 vertebrae at the most. When I want to get the full range, I'll go do it at a wall, because then I can really roll, right? And I'm going to come down a little bit more towards the bottom of my scapula. I'll keep moving up. I'll end up off of my mat. I don't mind that. You could readjust and go down. Actually, for camera angle, I probably should. I'm going to end up off of the camera. So again, I'm kind of at the bottom of my shoulder blades, and I might pause. And whatever kind of movement. When I get down low enough in my body, I can start to windshield wiper my legs, and I can start to play with my musculature that way against the surface of the balls, if that makes sense. But I could also, if it's better for me at this juncture, do that from, right, moving my upper body in whatever capacity. And again, I don't have a prescription for this. I really do believe it's like I can give you some tools that I've learned from playing, but most of what I know is, I listen to a teacher and they're like, roll it out this way. And then I take the balls and I just play. And I'm like, ooh, oh, and different days, different things. And maybe you lift those hips and you roll a little bit. I'm going to bring my elbows down for this one because, it's almost too much pressure at this point. And I'm in that place in my body. That's a sensitive place today. Good to know. Pardon me. And then I'm going to go a little bit lower down. I'm just a little bit above my lowest ribs. You don't have to move at all. You can just stay and lay on them. Again, we start to get to the point in the body where we can manipulate it from top or bottom. And what I mean by that is maybe windshield wiper is like your jam, and you do windshield wiper and it's like, it just gives you just enough of a movement into those muscles without it being too much pressure. Maybe you prefer to work from the upper body. Again, I'm going to stick with my movement from my lower body. Then I don't have to bear the weight of my head and use my core as much. Maybe you begin to roll. And for this one, I'm just kind of scooting my shoulders because I don't want to use that much core. I could lift up, really high and roll, but that is more pressure than I want and not feeling that good to me today in my body. Do what feels good for you. And then you're a little lower, so now I'm at the bottom of my ribs, kind of around the kidneys as well, right? That whole area. So again, you could go from the upper body, but now that we're this low in the body, probably chances are pretty good that you're going to get a little bit more benefit movement from the lower body moving. And I find windshield wiper to be one of the just the most delightful. You know, every once in a while I'll bring my knees up and in, but again, for me, I don't feel the need often to put that much pressure into my body. I don't think that rolling on really hard balls and rollers and things like that, I'm not convinced that's helpful. I think our body braces against, and then it kind of defeats the purpose, yeah? But a lot of people love trigger point release and shiatsu, you know, and Swedish massage, really hard things, and that's effective for your body. Wonderful. And then maybe rolling that last little bit kind of up and down, right? And I'm going to reach my arms overhead, almost like I'm going to be doing a, what's it called, bow pose. Just so I have a little lift in my shoulders without having to bear all of that weight and use so much core. And then I'm going to pause when I'm a little bit underneath where I just was. Now I'm kind of above my back of my pelvis, those bones, that back ridge. And I'm going to soften there. I'm just going to let the body accept these strange structures that are moving up into my musculature and my fascia. If it feels appropriate to move into windshield wiper or whatever's working for you today. Again, a little more pressure, probably the knees up and in. Some people even like to put, you know, like hands underneath the hips so they have the full weight in and move back, and I'm demonstrating that. But again, that's more pressure than I'd like today. So I'm gonna go back to windshield wiper for me. And then let's go ahead and roll that last little bit down towards our sacrum. And settle in. So I'm not quite to my buttocks yet. That'll be our next stop. I'm just a little bit above that. Feel free to add any motion in to the lower body to just kind of roll through the musculature. And then for the last bit, and I'm just going to bring myself back down in case of the camera. Normally I will just do this and I don't care how far off of my mat I go. We're going to actually separate the two balls now. Right, you can leave one in or you can take both of them completely out. I usually just leave one in because I'm lazy. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring those in, but now I'm going to separate them out a little bit, and I'm going to try to go behind my hip socket, right, in the gluteal area. And again, first I'm just going to simply rest and let the weight come down. You could do this against a wall as well as if it feels like it's too much pressure, right? You can stay still, you don't have to move, but you might start to move into that windshield wiper. So I have the balls separated out. You might find that having them in, right? But I'm kind of, just to show you, I guess, on my back side, I'm about here-ish, which is about the back side of the hip socket, somewhere right around in there. Pardon. I am not excited and so excited to go see my doctor tomorrow and potentially start antibiotics to try to clear up my sinusitis. I'm done with it. Any movement that feels good, right? And it might be you just keep the balls still and you move through windshield wiper. On this one, sometimes I leave my feet and knees a little still and I sway my hips from side to side. So again, I can't encourage you enough just to take the liberty to play. And I think you're going to end up finding your spots, right? And then we're going to move both balls over to the right hip, let's say. You don't have to put them in the back in the sock unless you really need to. And then let your right leg move out into external rotation. Just let it fall down into what would be half-bound angle, right? And pause. And if that feels like too much pressure, get out, right? And then you might just bring it up and down a little bit a couple of times. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to move both of them over to the left, somewhere around that hip joint, but now I'm moving a little further down towards my outer hip. And I'm going to let it fall out for a second and pause and take a breath, right? And I'm going to try to soften. This side is really bracing against the balls moving up into it. Right? The other side was a little bit, but not really, and I could soften. This side is like, ah, good to know. And then a little bit up and a little bit down. I don't always have an answer as to why or whatever that is, but I do like to gather that information and try to act accordingly. You know, not force the left hip into anything today if it's feeling really protective. And then bring that up. Go ahead and take those out of the way. Put them off to the side. It's okay if they roll. You'll find them in a little bit. You can either have your feet wide with the knees lean in, or you can extend the legs out. And let's just take a couple of moments in stillness, maybe the eyes closed, and just notice if your back of your torso from the occiput, where your skull and your neck connect, all the way down, you know, especially along the spine, of course, all the way down to your glutes. Has anything shifted or changed? And of course, all these bits and pieces are connected, so the work we do at the neck might affect a pain on the shoulder, or deferred, or referred, I should say, pain down into the arm or numbness. And hips, well, that's all the innervation for the lower legs goes down through there. So we can really affect so much from this work. It's not just the areas we touched. So we're going to end from here. You might just stay on the ground and be here for a few more minutes and just relax. If you are on a time commitment, let's all just bring our hands together here on the ground and say our namaste from here. Namaste.